Tonight on Bridge City News, the Alberta Serious Incident Response Team has been brought in to investigate an incident involving a Lethbridge police officer and a teenager. The Tabor Health Foundation has had another successful telethon. We will tell you how much was raised. And playoff football hit Southern Alberta with an exciting finish involving Lethbridge and Raymond. Ainsley O'Reilly has the results of the big game. Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. The Alberta Serious Incident Response Team has been brought in to investigate what happened when a Lethbridge police officer and an 18-year-old man from Brooks got involved in a wrestling match after police were called to an out-of-control house party in Lethbridge last weekend. The 30-second video has gone viral and has been seen more than 30,000 times on social media. Police say an officer was attempting to arrest an individual when another man tackled the officer to the ground. The man then attempted to hold the officer down and grab his taser. The man involved in the incident is 18-year-old Peyton Manny-Schatz, who turned himself into Calgary police after a warrant was issued for his arrest. He's expected to make his first appearance in Lethbridge Court on November the 20th. Downtown businesses are becoming more vocal as they're falling victim to downtown crime. Many shop owners say they are suffering from fewer foot traffic as a result of increased criminal activity, not enough police officers, and because of their close proximity to Arches, the supervised safe injection and consumption site. Local business owner and downtown BRZ member Hunter Hagee says more needs to be done.
As of late, safety has become more of a concern, but I still feel it's safe downtown. Generally, we're just trending in the wrong direction. We've worked very hard for the last 25 years to build downtown to be very successful, and we're at risk of losing that. We have a supervised consumption site, and we're allowing laws to be broken there, and that's fine because we want to help people and we want to save lives, and that's really important. I have a great amount of compassion for that. But at the same time, when people leave that area, we can't just allow them to do whatever they like. We have to enforce laws. People are impacted by this, definitely. I talk to other business owners and business is down. We can change that quickly. We're coming into the Christmas season. It's a big time of year for retailers, and that can turn really fast. And things are still promising and rosy downtown. I don't want to paint too bleak of a picture. I just want to make sure people understand that there's concerns going on, and if we address it now, we can fix this before it's too late.
The Tabor District Health Foundation had another successful telethon yesterday. The group raised $189,000 in just 6 hours, far surpassing its goal of $150,000. The event, called the Share in the Experience of Giving, was held strictly online this year. The group's fundraising coordinator says by the first week of November, they had received a list of what the hospital and AHS need in terms of equipment.
Usually those costs run about, or those expenses are about $150,000 to $180,000. So really we're just wanting to meet the expenses that people would like to see covered.
This is the 24th year that Tabor District Health Foundation has hosted a fundraising telethon. According to Alberta Health Services, 73% of Southern Albertans are not getting enough exercise. As Josie Foster reports, a local gym is reducing barriers to fitness and raising awareness about the importance of physical exercise for everyone.
Starting this weekend, actually, we have a free Try It Out Sundays. Every Sunday is going to be free. You can feel free to come on in and do your own thing, or you can come in and our trainer, Tennille, will be putting you guys through workouts. So if you've always been on the fence, kind of how maybe chaos can fit into your lifestyle or your budget, Sundays are definitely the day to come in and check it out.
Gimblett is willing to offer this because he and his staff believe in the power of physical activity.
It adds to your quality of life. It makes life more vibrant. It makes it so that you can enjoy the things that you love to do better, and it makes life fun. It makes you realize you can do things you didn't think you could maybe do.
It gives me the strength and the flexibility and the balance not to be falling down. And as I age, I feel my balance going a little bit, and so I have to keep working on that.
Here at Chaos Conditioning, trainers create an environment for all people to meet their goals based on an approach called functional fitness.
we're three-dimensional movers as a whole. So we don't just move straight forward, we don't move straight to the side, and we don't just rotate. So we have to implement all three of those planes of motion into one big dynamic movement.
You're going to move better throughout your day-to-day, and you'll probably notice changes in your body a lot quicker at the beginning is what usually happens. So whether that's weight loss or getting more toned or better cardiovascular conditioning.
For Bridge City News, I'm Josie Foster.
Lethbridge County will finally receive some financial relief from the province following last spring's flooding. The $275,000 from the Disaster Recovery Program will help cover the cost of fixing damaged infrastructure and help the county recover costs of cleaning out culverts and ditches. If you suffered property damage or had other expenses associated with the flood, you too can apply for financial assistance. An application form can be found at the Alberta Disaster Recovery website. The deadline to apply is January the 2nd. The Government of Canada says it wants to take in more refugees. Immigration and Refugee Minister Ahmed Hussein said our country will take in 40,000 more immigrants by 2021 to a new target of 350,000. He says the vast majority of the newcomers are coming under economic programs designed to address skills shortages and gaps in the labor market. Now, there's one local entrepreneur who really appreciates the hard work new immigrants bring to his business.
Our whole kitchen is powered by newcomer women. We've had a great time working with Ola, who is our chef. She is, especially hardworking. She has a family to balance as well, and she still maintains time to be flexible and being able to input not only our kitchen, but take pride in her work and then bring that to the Lethbridge market. They are looking at, in my case, Abdullah, who's the other co-founder with Jiran, has only in 2 years, he's not only a student, but he is a scholarship recipient. He is an award recipient of Newcomer of Promise. He has now started a business. He is already contributing to our economy, and all that within 2 years.
There is nothing like playoff football. As video journalist Ainsley O'Reilly explains, last night's big game in Lethbridge was a real barn burner.
What's better than Thursday night football? What's better than probably the greatest rivalry in Southern Alberta high school history? A Tier 1 team typically needs nearly 1,500 students. LCI has just 738, and Raymond tallies just 492. As closely matched as two teams can get, LCI took a late 10-7 lead into the scoreless second half. Rams quarterback Ty Mazutnik attempted to move the chains to the 34-yard line when grade 12 halfback Callum Highland stepped up big for the pick. That set up LCI quarterback Zach Jacobs to seal the deal with a 7-yard rushing touchdown. Here's Highland on the pick.
Once he threw it, I knew I could jump it, so I just planted, went as fast as I could, and it turned out the right way. Thank goodness. I don't even care about the interception. We needed that score to for sure secure this game. We needed that, and to show that we are destined to do something in this game, that we got to keep going. Got to show the province that we're not here to quit, that we're competitors.
This was the game between the fourth and fifth best team in the province, and so that's pretty close to a provincial semifinal game. And both teams had guys that were hurt coming in, and both teams had to dig down. And, my hats go off to the Comets for a great job.
If any two teams are going to have a nail-biter finish, it's going to be the LCI Rams and the Raymond Comets. Back on September 28th, the Rams defeated the Comets by 3 points, and tonight they were victorious 17-7. The Rams are going to be playing an undetermined Calgary team next Saturday. They haven't won a championship since 24 years ago. From University Stadium, Ainsley O'Reilly, BCN.
In any pregnancy, it's important to know how the baby is doing. Gerard Lampo finds out the importance of preg checking in cattle. Now, caution with this next story that some of these images may be of a sensitive nature.
We are determining whether cows and heifers have gotten pregnant through the summer, or whether what we call open or non-pregnant.
Dr. Darrell Hanley, who is one of the partners at the Lloydminster Animal Hospital, says producers, especially on the purebred side, will want to know whether their cow is having twins or even around the 60 to 90-day gestation, whether it's a bull or a heifer.
Preg checking it's economical. The reasons behind the advantages of preg checking to find out whether they are carrying a calf is that it's expensive if they're not. Cows, heifers are an investment, and if they're not going to give us a calf in the fall, which we can make money on, then we're feeding them through the winter. We're having to breed them again a year later. On average, feeding a cow through the winter is going to be $500, $600, $700 that we would spend, and they're not even pregnant, waiting for a chance to breed them a year later.
At $800 to $1,200 a calf for fall sales, it's not economical to run an operation with cows that are not producing calves. Veterinarians will physically check for a calf as well as use ultrasound technology.
We can find things like an abnormal pregnancy, we can find infections internally, we can find tumors, something wrong with the ovaries, and so there's lots of other things that we can determine, not just whether or not they're pregnant.
Your vet can find what's called free Martins. That's where there's a boy-girl twin. Dr. Hanley says there's an 80% chance the female calf won't be able to reproduce. Back to the economics, producers may keep an open cow for another reason.
Unless they're an expensive purebred animal that may be worthwhile keeping. On the commercial side, when they're not purebred, it doesn't make any financial sense to keep them for an extra year to breed them a year later.
These Black Angus and Speckled Park in particular produce good marbling and are on track for spring deliveries.
She could be as early as April 12th.
Clubroot has been found in 37 Saskatchewan canola fields. The serious soil-borne disease causes the premature death of some plants, including canola. The Saskatchewan government, along with Sask Canola, are conducting extensive clubroot surveys this year involving 1,800 fields. The Canola Council of Canada says preventing the spread of clubroot spores is critical to managing the disease. There have been nearly 3,000 confirmed cases of the disease in Alberta as well since it was first reported in 2003. A Winnipeg man convicted of sexual attacks on women has been sentenced to 14 years in prison. 54-year-old Douglas Bowman was found guilty last year of sexual assault with a weapon and uttering threats. The court heard he attacked 2 women who were working in the sex trade at knife point and threatened to kill them. The dangerous offender designation means he could be in jail indefinitely. If he is released, however, he would be under supervision for another 10 years. Google employees in Toronto joined an international protest against the company staging a walkout yesterday. One employee says workers are demanding structural changes to end sexual harassment and discrimination.
Time's up at Google. Time's up on sexual harassment. Time's up on abuse of power. And time's up on systemic racism. We're here to say enough is enough. We are demanding structural changes with explicit goals of transparency, accountability, and equity. How? An end to forced arbitration, a right to support and representation in conversations with HR, a commitment to end pay inequity and opportunity inequity, transparency into the pay gaps and into the sexual harassment that is clearly pervasive at our company.
The federal election is still a year away, but tempers have been flaring on Parliament Hill, especially between the Tories and the Liberals. Our parliamentary reporter Ray Fillion says both Scheer and Trudeau agree that this election could get nasty.
And you can feel things are getting nasty between the two parties. We can see that the rhetoric is getting heavier and heavier in the House of Commons and even outside of the parliamentary precinct.
Mr. Fillion will also talk about why Justin Trudeau's carbon tax has been gaining a lot of momentum. Watch for that full interview coming up after business news. 5 weeks after taking second place in the provincial election, New Brunswick's Liberal government has fallen on a confidence vote on its throne speech. Premier Brian Gallant is going to see Lieutenant Governor to resign as leader and suggest that the leader of the Conservative Party to try and form the next government. PC leader Blaine Higgs plans a visit to the Lieutenant Governor as well and says he believes his minority government can survive 4 years by producing results. Following the assisted suicide death of a Halifax woman yesterday, the NDP has questioned the government about making changes to advanced consent laws. The Liberals say they are awaiting recommendations from an expert report.
Audrey Parker of Halifax is dying today. She has stage 4 cancer and lives in terrible pain. She's chosen to end her life much sooner than she would like. Audrey was forced to make this agonizing choice because our existing medical assistance in dying law doesn't allow for advanced requests. She worried that if she waited, she wouldn't be able to give the consent required. Soon the government's receiving an expert report on this law. Will it introduce legislation before the next election so people like Audrey never again have to make this agonizing choice?
If I could have given her authorization for advance request, I would have absolutely done so. But as parliamentarians, we know that the laws that we make are for all Canadians. That's why we put in place a group of experts to look at 3 sensitive areas as we want to protect our vulnerable Canadians. We want them to look at the issue involving advance consent, also the issue of mature minors, and also for serious mental health issues.
Police in Tampa, Florida say 5 people were hit by a car at a school bus stop yesterday morning. Authorities say 1 child was critically injured. The other 4 victims suffered serious injuries. The driver is now in custody.
So they watched it happen as he ran off the road and trampled over all of them. And they say it was at least 2 or 3 kids that was under the car.
The one was crying, calling, and the youngest one was laying on the sidewalk there. She wasn't moving, but you can see her breathing.
There's a lady that was holding one of her, the little boy, and the little boy, when she got hit, the little boy flew out of her hand. He hit the ground, and she flipped and hit her face. This strip here is like a speedway run strip.
More severe weather was expected today for the southeastern United States. At least 2 people's deaths have been attributed to the storms, and at least 12 tornadoes have been confirmed in Mississippi, Louisiana, and Alabama. The storms have left nearly 110,000 homes and businesses without electricity. Damage was heavy in Natchez, Mississippi, where people spent a lot of the day trying to cut up trees that fell on houses. Thousands of Central American migrants resumed their slow trek through southern Mexico yesterday. The group was shifting their route toward the Gulf Coast, a path closer to the Texas border. The migrants tried to arrange for bus transport, but failed, leaving them once again on foot, hitchhiking and looking for rides. The initial caravan has shrunk significantly from its estimated peak of more than 7,000 people. A caravan last spring fizzled to just 200 people who reached the U.S. border at San Diego. Veteran Hollywood actor Alec Baldwin has been arrested in New York City after fighting another man over a parking spot. Local reports say the 60-year-old actor punched a 49-year-old man after arguing that the parking spot was his. The dispute occurred around 2 p.m. local time in Manhattan's West Village. The 49-year-old male was taken to hospital after being struck in the face by Baldwin. Can you say lawsuit? Kind of a mixed bag weather-wise today, and more of the wet stuff is on the way. I'll have complete weather details coming up in just a moment. Mainly overcast today with light rain off and on. Tonight, a chance of showers mixed with flurries in a low near -3. Tomorrow, mainly sunny with a high of 8. Sunday, the clouds return with a high of 11. Cooling off Monday under an overcast sky with a high of only 3 degrees. Tuesday, a good chance of flurries developing with the temperature dropping to +1. Wednesday, a mixture of sun and cloud and a high of only -1. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 8 degrees and an average low of -4. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1981 at 23 degrees, and the record low was -25 in 1991. Sunrise was at 8:22, sunset at 6:08. Let's have a look at the national forecast for tomorrow. More rain is on tap for Vancouver with a high of 12. Victoria had a wind warning today, tomorrow periods of rain, and a high of 12 degrees as well. Calgary will be mainly sunny on Saturday with a high of 8. Clearing in Edmonton with a high of only 4 degrees. Periods of snow developing for Regina tomorrow and a high of +1. Saskatoon will be mainly overcast and 1 degree as well. Clearing in Winnipeg with a high of 3. Over in the central part of the country, Toronto will have rain and 7. Ottawa will have showers and 4 degrees. Montreal will have rain and 7 degrees. Fredericton, New Brunswick will be rainy and 16. Halifax, Nova Scotia will also be 16 with showers. Pretty much the same picture in Charlottetown, PEI. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, showers and a high of 14 degrees is expected for Saturday. Former Alberta Cabinet Minister Gary Marr has been hired as the new president of the Petroleum Services Association of Canada. The Calgary-based organization represents independent contractors and larger companies in Western Canada and around the world. Marr was elected as a PC in 1993 and served as Minister of Health, Education, and the Environment. The association also cited Marr's media skills and says it looks forward to him explaining to Canadians how the industry produces resources responsibly. Drilling for oil and natural gas will remain flat for the next year. Now that's according to the Petroleum Services Association of Canada. The group is forecasting that 6,600 wells will be drilled next year. That is down slightly from this year in all 4 western provinces. The company says heavy oil price differentials due to a lack of pipelines is largely responsible. The group says shipping more oil by rail helps, but is not the answer. The Alberta Energy Regulator says it does not agree with a presentation given by a senior executive that pegged the cost of cleaning up after the oil and gas industry at $260 billion. The regulator says that figure was wrong. It says it currently calculates the sector's accumulated environmental liability at just over $58 billion. The regulator says it deeply regrets the error. The Calgary Chamber of Commerce is putting its support behind the city's bid to host the 2026 Winter Olympic Games. The group says hosting the Games would help the business community. It does say, however, there should be a lid on costs and infrastructure for the Games should be modest. Calgary voters will decide if the city will put forward a bid to host the Games in a plebiscite set for November the 13th. Stats Canada says the national unemployment rate edged down last month even though the job growth was flat. The federal agency says the country added 11,200 new jobs in October, which is too few to be considered statistically significant. But it says the unemployment rate declined to 5.8% from 5.9% in September. It was mainly due to a dip in the labor force participation rate. That topped the expectations of economists and matches the reading's 40-year low for the 7th time in the past year. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the Alberta Serious Incident Response Team has been brought in to investigate what happened when a Lethbridge police officer and an 18-year-old man from Brooks got involved in a wrestling match. This occurred after police were called into an out-of-control house party in Lethbridge last weekend. Peyton Manyshots will make his first appearance in court on November 20th. When you see news happening, drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of today's top stories, check out our full newscast online at bridgecitynews.ca. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's carbon tax is actually becoming more popular with Canadians, if you can believe it. Our parliamentary reporter Ray Fillion has details next. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. The Gem of the West Museum Society in Coaldale is holding its annual Craft and Hobby Show on Saturday, November 3rd from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Admission is by donation. Come and see unique pieces from local artists, crafters, and vendors. For more information, contact Myrna at 403-345-4521 or email mlmo@shaw.ca. You're invited to the Knox United Church Annual Fall Supper being held Sunday, November 4th at the Tabor Community Center from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. featuring delicious roast beef and cabbage rolls. Tickets are $15 for adults, $6 for youth ages 6 to 12, and those 5 and under are free. Tickets are available at the church office or at the door. Takeout will also be available. Come out for a special evening entitled A Touch of Music and Inspiration, taking place Monday, November 5th in the lower level of the Keg. Presented by Lethbridge Women's Connection, enjoy music from the mixed quartet Forever Praise and hear an inspiring message from author and life coach Grace Fox on being an anchor in life's storms. Dinner is at 6:30 p.m. To reserve your spot, call B at 403-328-1708. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
While premiers are getting together to fight Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's carbon tax, a new Angus Reid poll says thanks to Trudeau's rebates, support for carbon pricing is running at about 50% now. Joining me from Ottawa is our parliamentary reporter Ray Fillion. Ray, who would have thought that Trudeau's pay for pollution tax is actually gaining some momentum here?
Well, it looks like a lot of people have been seduced by the idea of actually getting more into their pocketbook from that carbon tax than the carbon tax itself will cost them. At least that's the pledge that Prime Minister Trudeau made last week when he announced those rebates to Canadians in the provinces that will where the carbon tax will be imposed. Yeah, you're talking about that survey. Quite interesting results. 54% of Canadians now say they're in favor of the federal plan, as opposed to 46% who are opposed. And just a few months ago, according to Angus Reid, it was the other way around. 55% of Canadians opposing the carbon tax, 45% only saying they were in favor. But, you know, at 54-46, you can see that the country is still evenly split pretty much. It remains a very divisive issue. According to Angus Reid, the largest increases in support for the federal plan were found to be in Saskatchewan, plus 18, Quebec, plus 11, and Alberta. Alberta actually is the only province where support did not increase. Actually, it went down 1% compared to a few months ago. Ontario is the other Canadian province where there was a large increase in support for the carbon tax. And as we've discussed before, Hal, on this program, this carbon tax, this federal plan is going to be a central theme in the next election campaign. The Conservatives have been raising it again every day in the House of Commons for the past 2 or 3 weeks. Andrew Scheer talks about it every day. Justin Trudeau is out trying to sell the merits of his plan to Canadians. So it's going to be a major issue in the next election next year. But it looks, based on those figures, based on these numbers from Angus Reid, that many Canadians are starting to warm up to the Liberal idea.
Being online is a concern for many of us. Always concerns about having one of our accounts hacked into. You know, whether you're doing your online banking, whatever the case is. That's exactly what happened to Conservative MP Peter Kent. It wasn't his banking information, but his social media accounts were hijacked.
Yeah, big surprise to Mr. Kent and to a lot of Canadians this week. The Conservative MP from Ontario was actually locked out of both his Instagram and Facebook accounts by some hackers. And Mr. Kent has told the newspaper that he was actually quite surprised at how easy it was for those hackers to gain control of his accounts. And he wasn't the only parliamentarian to have that kind of nasty surprise over the past few days. A Conservative senator from Manitoba, Don Plett, had the same thing happen to his Twitter account. Some hacker took control of it. It was actually quite surprising because Senator Plett's photo on Twitter was replaced with a photo of a tattooed male model who described himself as a Harley Davidson enthusiast. If you know Senator Plett, he's not a Harley Davidson enthusiast at all. So he told a newspaper this week on Parliament Hill that he learned some valuable lessons. He also said that he learned 2 things in particular. Number 1, that Twitter's security system is suspect. And number 2, that his hacker is spending a lot more time at the gym than he does, which is kind of funny. But, you know, with the next election approaching here in Ottawa, there's a lot of prevention going on for parliamentarians. Be careful with your social media. It's easy for hackers to take control of them. Change your passwords regularly. Don't have those tiny passwords that are easy to guess. And don't click on suspicious links. I had the same thing happen to me a few years ago where someone I thought I knew had sent me some link over Twitter. I clicked on the link. Big mistake. My Twitter account was hacked. I started sending out bizarre tweets online. So there's a lot of prevention going on here on Parliament Hill ahead of the next election, because they say that computer security is going to be a major issue. A lot of people are trying to spread fake news, and what better than a politician's Twitter account or Instagram account to achieve that.
Yeah, very true, Ray. Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is still waiting for Justin Trudeau to call a by-election in the BC riding of Burnaby. Ray, Trudeau is taking his sweet time.
Yeah, I wonder why. What's bad for the NDP is good for the Liberals. And so you should know that there are 4 vacant seats right now in the House of Commons here in Ottawa. Last Sunday, Justin Trudeau called only 1 by-election. It was in the Ontario riding of Leeds-Grenville, which was left vacant by the sudden passing of former Conservative MP Gord Brown last May. So Mr. Trudeau had until this coming weekend to call a by-election, which he did last weekend. So The NDP came out swinging the following day saying, well, what the heck? Burnaby South is also vacant. Our leader is a candidate in that upcoming by-election. Why isn't the Prime Minister calling that by-election right now? They want, obviously, their leader to be in the House of Commons so that he could gain more exposure in the media, a better degree of notoriety at the federal level. But it looks like Prime Minister Trudeau is intent on taking his time before calling the by-election. He says that the riding of Burnaby South in British Columbia was only left vacant last month. So technically, Hal, he could wait until mid-March of next year, 2019, before calling the by-election. Obviously, as I said, what's bad for the NDP, what's bad for Jagmeet Singh, is good for Justin Trudeau. They're losing support left, right, and center, the New Democrats. And conversely, many of their supporters are now siding with the Liberals. They're not going to go for the Conservatives. So, yeah, he's taking a sweet time. And the Conservatives have also joined in the chorus, demanding that the Prime Minister call all by-elections. Obviously, what's bad news for the NDP is also bad news for the Conservatives, because they need a strong NDP to divide the vote on the left if they hope to form government.
Federal Conservative leader Andrew Scheer spent a bit of time on the prairies this summer. We had a chance to interview Mr. Scheer at the Calgary Stampede. Now he's doing some serious campaigning in both Ontario and Quebec. Tell me more about that.
Two very, very important provinces, obviously, for the federal Tories. Ontario, of course, being the most populous province, almost, more than a third of all federal ridings are in Ontario. So you can expect Conservative leader Andrew Scheer to spend quite a bit of time in that province between now and the next election. He was there. He was at Queen's Park to meet officially with the new premier, Doug Ford, a fellow Conservative who was elected back in June. They talked about Mr. Trudeau's carbon tax at length, both men being staunchly against Mr. Trudeau's carbon tax scheme. And then on Thursday, the Conservative leader was in Quebec City to meet with the new premier there, François Legault. He's also going to be spending a lot of time in the province of Quebec, because both the Conservatives and the Liberals think that they can make gain. They can exploit the fact that that support for the NDP and the Bloc Québécois are crumbling right now. It's not going well for either of those parties. So both the Liberals and the Conservatives believe that they can make some serious gains next year in the province of Quebec. Mr. Scheer is actually going to be spending 3 days campaigning in the province of Quebec. On Saturday, he's going to be holding a big rally in the Beauce riding south of Quebec City, which happens to be the riding of Maxime Bernier, who quit the Conservative Party in a huff last August, just before the Tory convention in Halifax. So the Conservatives and Mr. Scheer are deploying all the artillery to try to beat him. They're going to be holding, as I said, a big rally in his riding. Local mayors are going to be there. A lot of farmers are going to be there. They're all banding together, apparently, against Maxime Bernier. So expect to see a lot of Andrew Scheer in the coming months in both Ontario and Quebec.
Speaking of Mr. Scheer, he's painting some of the mainstream media as being very pro-Justin Trudeau. And he says as well, the election campaign leading up to the fall of 2019, Ray, could get very nasty.
Yeah, absolutely. Nasty between him and Mr. Trudeau. Both of them have actually said publicly that they're expecting the next campaign to be one of the nastiest in history. And you can feel things are getting nasty between the two parties. We can see that the rhetoric is getting heavier and heavier in the House of Commons and even outside of the parliamentary precinct. But yeah, Mr. Scheer's Conservatives have also been spending some time over the past few weeks attacking members of the media, denouncing on social media some newspaper articles, some reporting that they don't like. And Mr. Scheer actually at a campaign-style rally in Ottawa a couple of weeks ago publicly said, and I quote, that Justin Trudeau has the media on his side, the pundits, the academics, and the institutions, everyone who wants to lecture you about how to spend your own money and live your own life. Now, this is straight out of Stephen Harper's playbook. We heard those kinds of words many, many times when the Conservatives were in power under Stephen Harper. They're attacking the media, trying to portray the media as opposing, being against the Conservatives. And this is a good way, obviously, for the Conservatives to mobilize their base. There's nothing like telling their supporters, it's only you and us against the world. It's a good way to drum up support get people to write checks, donations to the party, and mobilize the base ahead of the election. So I think that this is the game that's being played right now.
Dairy producers in Canada are not happy with the new trade agreement called the USMCA, but there's word now that they will be compensated thanks to the flood of American products hitting our store shelves. But Ray, it may take a little bit of time.
Yeah, the very next day after Canada concluded talks with the Americans on that new NAFTA 2.0 deal, the federal government, Mr. Trudeau and Ms. Freeland, announced that Canada's dairy farmers impacted by the new concessions that were made to American dairy producers would be compensated. But this week, the announcement that came from the Agriculture Minister, Wayne Easter, wasn't about compensation. It was about consultation. They're creating some groups to consult with the industry, the dairy industry, the poultry industry as well, Canadians in general, as to what the best way to compensate dairy farmers would be. So it looks like it's going to take quite a few months before money actually rolls farmers' way. But I got to say, to be truly honest, that the government still has a lot of time before the new deal, the USMCA, comes into force. The deal hasn't been officially ratified by either of the three countries, Canada, the United States, and Mexico. We don't know yet when the new deal is going to be signed, and we don't know when it's going to take effect, but it could be quite some time before it takes effect. So the government still has some time to act in that department.
Now here's a story which has many people quite upset. Adrienne Clarkson has been receiving more than $100,000 a year to cover office expenses since she left office in 2005. Right? That was almost 14 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. It's been a while, and a lot of Canadians, including here, members of Parliament, didn't even know that former Governor Generals could get money, actually, financial support from taxpayers, and that's the case. We've learned from the National Post this week that they can actually expense office supplies, office space, office assistant. Most former GGs have been doing it, but according to Canada's public accounts, Adrienne Clarkson, who left her position as the Queen's representative back in 2005, is the one who's been charging the most, roughly over $100,000 for most years since she's left. So over a 12-year period, she's raked in $1.1 million that way, and that's on top of her pension that she's also getting paid for by Canadian taxpayers. We're talking about $1.6 million over the period since 2005. So according to a lot of opposition MPs, both New Democrats and Conservatives, that's way too much money. Something has to give, something has to change. And the Prime Minister was asked by the media about it this week. He said that, yeah, we might have a look at it. He says his government is open to looking at it, but he also said that former Governor Generals are people who, according to Mr. Trudeau, did a lot for the country, so they deserve to be adequately compensated even years after they've left office. So Prime Minister is open to the idea of looking at this, but I'm not convinced that he's going to change anything.
Ray, Greyhound pulled out of Western Canada. How are the feds responding to that need, especially in rural communities?
Well, on the day of the last routes in Western Canada, the Transport Minister held a news conference on Parliament Hill. That was on Wednesday morning, and he said that Ottawa will be offering a 2-year bridge funding to fill service gaps where the Greyhound buses used to roll. It's a cost-sharing arrangement with the provinces, but he didn't provide a specific figure as to how much Ottawa will be forking out to assist people in the prairies. Greyhound is gone, but the federal government says 87% of the routes have been picked up by other companies, and the feds say that they will provide funding for alternative in the remaining 13%, but we don't know exactly how much that means in terms of a specific dollar amount.
Our parliamentary reporter, Ray Fillion, joining me once again from Ottawa. Thanks so much, Ray.
My pleasure, Hal.
Religious minorities often face persecution in various countries around the world. Unfortunately, the most persecuted group is Christianity. Joining me now for an update is Greg Musselman, spokesperson for Voice of the Martyrs, joining me via Skype from St. Albert, Alberta. Welcome back to BCN.
Oh, it's good to be back with you, Hal.
Greg, explain to our viewers exactly what Voice of the Martyrs is all about.
Well, Voice of the Martyrs is a ministry that, ministers to the persecuted church around the world. We work in about 33 countries. And, we do things like projects. We bring awareness, of course, back here in Canada to pray. So we're active in terms of being in the field, and then also, linking Christians in Canada to Christians in other parts of the world in practical ways. And I think the most important thing is that we pray, and as the Lord leads us, then we get involved in various areas around the world.
Now, do you have any numbers, any hard numbers of how many Christians are persecuted and how many are killed around the world?
Well, numbers are a very difficult thing. We know there's millions and millions of Christians that are being persecuted. Some say about 1 in 12 don't have the same kinds of religious freedom that we do. Now, often numbers are, sort of bandied around. 90,000 Christians are killed every year. But when you break that down and you look at terrorism, so a country like Syria, well, Christians are killed there because of the war, same in Iraq, but so are Muslims. So probably 30% of those would be probably people that would be killed as a result of being in a war zone. Then you have, terrorism that's also involved, and the tribal things that are happening. So you may have up to, as I say, 90,000 a year, and that would exclude, car accidents, death by natural causes or sickness. But Open Doors, our good friends over there, they say it's probably about 1,200. You say, okay, well, 90,000, 1,200. But then the 1,200 number is very, very conservative, because you're not talking about what's going on in countries like North Korea. And again, you get in the war zones. How many of those Christians were killed because they were Christian? How many were killed because they were just living in a place that was under attack? But we do know that there are millions and millions, tens of millions of Christians facing some form of opposition. They maybe not have the freedom like in a country like Saudi Arabia, where they can actually meet, or a country like Somalia, where if you convert from Islam and it's found out that you could be killed. So there is difficulty facing Christians around the world. And as you mentioned, Christians are the most persecuted people around the world, which we understand, because that's what kind of the Bible tells us about, is that the kingdom of God would suffer violence. And then bringing that message of Christ puts people in very dangerous situations often.
Now, you talked a little bit about Asia with China and North Korea, and I understand you spent some time in North Korea. Now, it's really bad for persecuted Christians there, but some of the most violent, I was talking to the good folks with Open Doors as well, they say the worst violence is actually in Pakistan. Have you heard the same thing?
Yeah, Pakistan is very dangerous. So is Nigeria. I mean, these are Islamic countries. And, so there's the actual outright attacks that come against Christians. North Korea, which is on the Open Doors list, World Watch, for like a number of years now, I think more than 10. And the reason that is because under the Kim regime, under the Juche system, you have to worship the Kim family. And if you are, worshiping Jesus, well, that is considered treason. That can have you killed. That can have you put into prison. But often we don't even know who's being killed. I've heard, again, conservative numbers, 30,000 Christians are imprisoned in North Korea. It may be more than that. There may be 100,000 Christians there. There may be as many as 300,000 Christians. So numbers are difficult when you have a regime that's really closed off, a hermit kingdom. Although, there has been some progress. The president of South Korea meeting with Kim Jong-un. And so we're, at least there's some breakthrough, hopefully, we pray, with that area being demilitarized. And that the part of that would be then the Christians would have more freedom. I don't see that happening anytime soon. But again, when we talk numbers, most dangerous places, I've been in Pakistan, I've been in Nigeria, I've been barely in North Korea, just on the DMZ there. But all those places are very dangerous, and a lot of difficulty for our brothers and sisters there.
So what is happening in Nigeria? You spent some time there as well. Are they continuing to have major problems with Boko Haram?
Yeah, Boko Haram is a terrible group. As you know, the Chibok girls, they kidnapped 276 girls, back about 4 years ago now. And there's still about 112 of those girls that are still missing. Some have passed away that we know of. Some have been, forced into marriage and had babies. So Boko Haram is a brutal group. They're an Islamic group. They have ties with Al-Qaeda and some of the most brutal Islamic groups around the world. But you also have the Fulani herdsmen, and they're a tribal group. And they're a bit nomadic, and they have their cattle, and they roam the land. And so where I was in the Middle Belt recently, that's an area that there's been a lot of violence. And what happens is that the Fulani herdsmen are grazing through the lands and often are owned by Christians. The Christians protest, and all of a sudden an uprising breaks loose there. And so when I traveled, to the Middle Belt there in Plateau State, that area had really been plagued by violence for a long time. And then there was a little bit brief of a reprieve there. That's when I was there. We talked to some of the people, but again, when you meet with them, they say, well, this could blow up at any time. So actually, the Fulani herdsmen have killed more people than the Boko Haram over the last couple of years. Boko Haram, of course, is well known more so because they blow up things like churches and mosques and cause great harm and difficulty. But the Fulani herdsmen, they'll go into villages, they'll burn the churches down, they'll kill people there, they'll rape the women and the children and horrible things like that. So they're also a group that has to be watched as well. And the Christians are very concerned because, again, they don't know at any time that whole thing could blow up again.
Now, still in Africa, Kenya seems to be a safer place than Nigeria, but recently a bus was pulled over by Muslim extremists and 2 passengers were executed when they failed to recite Muslim prayers. Tell me more about that.
Well, there's an area called Garissa. Now, you may remember how there was a situation just a few years ago up in that part of the country. And this, again, gets close into Somalia. And that's where the Al-Shabaab is. And they're again, another radical militant Islamic group. And just recently, middle part of September, a bus is going up to Garissa. They're stopped. And then these terrorists, I would call them terrorists, they took these people off the bus, found out they were Christian. And when they couldn't recite Islamic prayers and verses from the Quran, they were tied up and executed. And again, what's sort of playing into this is that you've got in Somalia, this Al-Shabaab, again, radical, they're just horrible. Their brand of Islam, they kill other Muslims as well. We know what happened in Nairobi at the mall when all those people were killed in there. So they're upset because the Kenyan government has gone along with other African nations to try to stop the spread of the Al-Shabaab and their brand of Islam. And so now the Al-Shabaab sees the Kenyan government as in opposition, and so they're trying to cause as much damage as they possibly can.
Now, what's happening in India right now? I know there's been a bit of a crackdown on evangelism. Charges have been laid against 271 Christians after a complaint was made by a Hindu activist group.
Yeah, there's a group called the Hinduvuta. And again, when you look at the BJP party in India, it's a militant, I would say militant Hindu group. And their understanding is, or at least what they're purporting is, that if you are Indian, you are Hindu. And anybody that doesn't go along with that is then considered, an opposition of what they're trying to do. So Christians are often, again, caught in the middle of this because they're saying, no, we're not Hindu, we're Christians. And when you think about India, and their history is 2,000 years, going right back to the early days of the church, St. Thomas, is purported to have gone to India to bring the gospel there. So one of Jesus' disciples, and it was martyred there, as history tells us. That so you got a long, line of Christian history there. But again, Christianity is often seen as an American religion, and so these guys are pretty radical, and they're just saying, hey, if you don't want to be Hindu, then get out of the country, or at least hide yourself and don't say anything. But if you're active, and if you believe the Great Commission of telling others about Jesus, you run afoul of these groups like the Hinduvuta and the more militant Hindu groups.
Now, we also need to hear that prayers do get answered sometimes, praise report. Now, there's a story about a man in Bangladesh who converted to Christianity from the Muslim faith and he was released after spending, 4 years in jail?
Yeah, this brother's name is Sazir Islam, and he became a believer in 2012. And he was very excited about, his new faith. He, of course, came from a Muslim background, as you can tell by his name. And so in September 23rd, 2014, he was coming back from actually one of our training centers with the Voice of the Martyrs. And he was picked up and he was arrested and charged with murder. And he said, I have nothing to do with this. And he later found out the reason he was charged with murder is because of his Muslim, leaving Islam and becoming a Christian. And so he was targeted at that point and then falsely accused and put in prison. But what you say, Hal, is true, that we need to be praying about these situations, that prayer works. There's a verse in the Bible, Hebrews 13:3, that says, remember those in prison as if you were in prison with them. Some translations say, or chains. And so we need to be praying. And we're, grateful that this brother has been released and he's recovering at home right now.
That's amazing. Now let's talk a bit about Bangladesh. What faith groups are really dominant there, and what is the government position on evangelism? How are Christians being treated?
Well, Bangladesh, if you remember back, the British India, and then India split, and you have Pakistan, which of course is a Muslim country. We talked a little bit about that. Bangladesh also is a Muslim country. And so what happened as a result of all that is that, they were split off, and India in the middle of all that, but they did become more radical. Now, like a lot of countries, Bangladesh officially has freedom of religion. But in practice, that's not the case. You've got, family persecuting, family members if they leave Islam and become Christians. You have the societal issues as well. We just talked about the false accusations that are often made against Christians, or, Christian women are, kidnapped or forced into marriages with Muslims. So officially, they would say they have freedom of religion. And in some parts of the country, that's true. But, Bangladesh is a pretty broken country, a lot of poverty. And, it's a situation where there's a lot of, tension. And again, because of the radicalization of many Muslims around the world, Bangladesh also has that happening as well.
So, Greg, bottom line is, what can we do to help here in Canada? I know prayer is a good start, and you also have a letter writing campaign. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, if you go to vomcanada.com, you can find out about the letter writing that we do. And, I've been in places, I remember years ago being in China and talking with some Chinese believers that had been under house arrest, and then they were released. And then they, while they were in prison, they were getting all these letters from all over the world. And this brother and sister couldn't speak English, and some of the guards could. So they would be actually reading them the letters, and they go, "Who are you people? How come are you so famous?" And they said, "Well, we're not famous, but we have many brothers and sisters in Christ around the world." So it works. The reality is a lot of the letters will probably not get through. We don't know for sure, but some of them do. And so it's very important to write letters. And then what we do on our website is give instruction of how to write letters. We have to be very sensitive depending on the country that they're writing to, and how we identify ourselves in terms of we're writing the letters. But it's a great way, to do something practically. As you're writing the letter, you're praying for that person. And again, who knows if that letter gets through? We have to be careful on, if we put Bible verses in, things like that, because it could actually make it worse for our brothers and sisters. But again, we'll give the guidelines on there. We want to keep these people safe.
Now, you also have an opportunity for people to give towards something called the Christmas Blessing Project. What is that all about?
Yeah, that's where we, hand out Christmas gifts. This year it'll be in Iraq and Syria. I've had opportunity, to be in some of those countries. I remember being in Jordan, and we were handing, out Christmas presents to not only Iraqi Christians, Syrian Christians, but also to, Christians in Jordan as well, and then Muslims. If we go into a village and it's all Muslim, and we're meeting there and we're talking to the people, we want to be able to bless them as well. So it's a great opportunity, to spread some Christmas joy, get some practical things in there. There may be, some toys, things like that, but also toiletries, things that are, that we take for granted here, Hal. But it's a great opportunity to do that. And then I'd say as well, when it comes to supporting the persecuted church, ministries like the Voice of the Martyrs, you've also talked to Open Doors, Christian Solidarity Worldwide. There's many great organizations. The one that I represent, VOM Canada, there's many ways that we can help and get the word out, into our local churches right across Canada, representatives in local churches, just to bring awareness, so again, we remember that, one part of the body suffers, we all suffer, and we're a part of this worldwide body, and we need to be remembering those that are in peril, suffering because of their faith in Jesus.
Now, you touched on Syria a little bit earlier in the interview. Where are we at with the Syria situation? How are the remaining Christians doing in some of the war zones?
Well, again, it's hard to get information out of some of these places because of, the destruction. Many of the Syrian Christians have left, and that would be the similar case in Iraq as well because of all the violence. There are people actually that we have sponsored that are living now here in Canada, that, in Edmonton, that are in Canada from Syria. Many of them have tried to get away. The Bible talks about, the various responses to persecution. Sometimes we need to leave because it's just too dangerous. There's other times we stay. Now, some have decided to stay. We were working with an evangelist who was in Damascus in Syria, and she would leave because she said, I need to be here. I need to help the people. But even over time, those that have the best intentions and feel God's call to be there, even they get worn down, and at some point they need to leave. So the church definitely is shrinking in Syria, and you think of the history, the Apostle Paul was on his way to Damascus when he had his conversion. We think of that, places like Iraq as well, Babylon, and all the history that is in that part of the world, and the church has been decimated. But on the other hand, the things that are happening is the many Muslims that are having dreams and visions of Jesus. The gospel is coming in there. There's bold Christians that are witnessing, even in the most dangerous places, because when you get into those situations, unlike here in Canada, well, I've got this to worry about and I'm living my life and I don't feel like I'm going to get bombed at, any moment. We can become lackadaisical. But in some of those places, they really are feeling the pressure. And again, I don't blame anybody for wanting to leave there. But we also do pray for those, the remnant, as Brother Andrew from Open Doors would say, to strengthen that which remains. And so we need to be praying for them.
Greg Musselman, spokesperson with Voice of the Martyrs, joining me via Skype from St. Albert, Alberta. Thanks a lot, Greg.
Thanks, Hal.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.